Well, good morning and welcome to this special session. The topic, very interesting topic, is meeting consumer demand in a time of water scarcity. Within the next 2 decades, demand for water will be surpassed by 40%. So the topic is very relevant for everyone, no matter what business you're in. Our presentation is sponsored today by Ecolab, and we thank Ecolab. Ecolab is a global leader in water hygiene and energy technologies that protect people and vital resources by providing comprehensive solutions to companies in more than 170 countries around the world. Jill Wyant is the Executive VP and President of Global Food and Beverage at Ecolab. She is responsible for Ecolab's dairy, brewing, beverage, and food processing industries. Please give a warm welcome to Jill Bryant.
Well, good morning. It's great to be here and to see many customers and partners in the room. So thanks for joining me. I think it's a relevant topic. You know, we all got up this morning, jumped in the shower, the water came on. You know, water is something that is such a precious commodity and yet something we take for granted. And so I'm excited to be here to engage you in a dialogue around how you continue to grow and operate your businesses amidst this backdrop of water scarcity. So to begin, around the world, companies are really feeling the impact of water scarcity. And so governments are imposing stricter regulations. Consumer and public awareness and scrutiny is certainly on the rise. And as you can see here from the scroll on the screen, it seems that hardly a day goes by when something related to a water crisis in some part of the world doesn't fail to hit the headlines. And, you know, given increased consumer and corporate and investor awareness around this issue of water scarcity, I think there's more attention being paid to the water that's needed to produce products we use in our everyday life. So we all know that people increasingly want to know how goods are manufactured and how services are delivered. And so this idea of the embedded water in everyday products is really very top of mind for a lot of folks. And so again, this is at a time when we're all trying to grow our businesses and meet demand around the world, more scrutiny, more attention paid to the hidden water in products we all consume. There are a number of important unstoppable trends, if you will, from a macro perspective that are also shaping this whole conversation about water. Populations are growing. So by 2050, it's estimated that populations will be up by 50%, and much of that in emerging economies, as we all know. The middle class is growing, more people with, 2 jobs, eating out of home, and increasingly people are moving and migrating into urban areas. There's aging populations in both developed and developing economies, and of course we all know the rise of the millennial consumer. And so together, these factors are coming together to, over time, increase demand for the goods and services that we all produce. And so this increased demand for goods and services is really against a backdrop of growing pressure on very scarce and limited water supplies. And so, food and energy and water, they're all highly interrelated. And the great connector between the three is plenty of water. And so we've heard about this water, energy, food nexus. It's this idea that, you need energy and water to produce food. Food production being one of the most water-intensive industries on the planet. You need water to provide energy and energy to provide food. And by 2030, it's estimated that we'll need 30% more water, 45% more energy, and 50% more food to meet, some of the demands driven by the trends that I just talked to you about. And so by 2050, a 55% increase in water production will be required, again, being driven by consumer demand, manufacturing, thermoelectric energy, and the like. And so it's this interrelationship between these three powerful dynamics that drive, again, this uptick in water demand against a backdrop of limited supply. So water is a finite and a very precious resource that is oftentimes most scarce in some of the fastest growing, most highly populated economies in the world. And so we fundamentally have 2 options to deal with this disconnect or the imbalance between the supply of water and underlying demand. Option 1 would be increase the amount of water. And of course, option 2 would be better utilize, better manage the supplies of fresh water that we have available to us today. And so option one, which involves trying to increase the amount of water, is going to be a tough challenge in the next decade or so, given that desalinization is still quite expensive and rather energy intensive, which really pulls us back to better management of the freshwater reserves that are available to us today, being hugely critical to our ability to meet business demand, meet demand growth around the world, while at the same time against a backdrop of constrained water supply. So industry and agriculture are the two largest consumers of our freshwater supplies. Agriculture, of course, being first and foremost. Agriculture is and will continue to be the biggest user of freshwater supplies at about 70% of freshwater consumption. Industry is second at about 20% of freshwater demand, and then domestic rounds it out at about 10% of freshwater use. And business leaders, businesses around the globe, are beginning to acknowledge the fact that water scarcity is a real challenge related to ongoing business success. At last year's World Economic Forum in Davos, the global water crisis rose to a top 3 business risk, both in terms of the likelihood that a water crisis would impact business, as well as the magnitude of that impact when and where it materializes. And increasingly, the large majority of US-based Fortune 500 companies are acknowledging that water has or is likely to impact their business, whether that be due to physical scarcity challenges, reputational risks, or the struggle we all have to keep pace with an ever-changing and dynamic regulatory landscape. So we're acknowledging that this challenge is very real. Many progressive companies, just a small subset of which are on this page, are all over this, right? So people are not standing still. And they're setting aggressive and forward-looking and ambitious goals. And many of these brands on this page are actually customers of Ecolab. And so we're partnering with customers like those you see on this page to really help them get after and meet their ambitious goals. And at our own company, we've set a goal of reducing freshwater usage across our operations by 20% by 2017 against our 2012 operational baseline. So we too are setting our own goals with respect to water stewardship. And so at Ecolab, we're in more than 1 million customer locations around the world in a variety of different industries and geographies. And so we've learned a lot by being on the ground shoulder to shoulder with our customers. And we're seeing, against this, again, backdrop of water scarcity, there are powerful dynamics at play. Things like, again, heightened awareness of the reputational considerations with respect to prudent use of water, dynamic and changing regulatory landscapes in nearly every geography around the world, and truly a desire to find innovation that can make the difference in moving the needle around preserving fresh water supplies. And so, driven by that, we're seeing our customers every day make decisions and take actions designed to reduce reliance on fresh water supplies while they continue to grow and operate their business. And so I wanted to share a couple of case studies of things that are happening today. And here we've highlighted a multinational beverage company. And this beverage company is taking significant and proactive efforts to increase operational water use efficiency. And amongst a variety of business goals, has set very stringent standards for reducing water usage per unit of finished goods. And so here we partnered with this customer inside of their US beverage manufacturing operations to really get after water savings without putting product safety at risk. And so, for example, in many beverage plants, obviously, historically they had used conveyor lubricants that contained a significant amount of water. And so by utilizing our DryX dry conveyor lubricant, we reduced water usage by upwards of 90 to 95% without so much as skipping a beat operationally or from a food safety perspective. And when they went to clean and sanitize their plants to prevent the products from, microbial contamination, we actually went from a 5-step cleaning process that used a lot of hot water to a 3-step cleaning process that used water at lower ambient temperatures and drove a nearly 50% reduction in water usage. And lastly, we helped them out with optimization and management of their utility systems, here cooling towers, where we used a technology platform we refer to as 3D TraceR to, again, reduce water use by 24 million gallons. So in total, nearly 250 million gallons of water saved, which is astoundingly the equivalent to 4 billion glasses of water, or enough to supply nearly 34,000 people. And so again, very simple use of technology that drove improved food safety, operational efficiency, water savings, and had the added benefit of saving time and saving energy. So good for business on all fronts. I have another example to share. This is actually Kemp's, which is a subsidiary of the Dairy Farmers of America. Kemp's is a leading dairy producer in the upper Midwest, so the place from which I hail. And so in one of their, like in most dairy manufacturing operations, again, they use clean-in-place systems. So clean-in-place is effectively a system whereby you can clean the manufacturing equipment in a plant, think of tanks, pipes, and vessels, without having to pull it all apart in order to clean it. And so Kemp's, at one of their plants in Rochester, Minnesota, that produces fresh milk, came to us and said, you know, we really need better visibility into the consistency and the performance and the natural resource usage of our washing, our clean-in-place systems. And so here again, we brought them 3D TraceR for clean-in-place, which basically took them from a system whereby, at best, they could audit manually, walk around the plant, and try with our service personnel to audit 5 or 10 or a dozen wash cycles or wash performances over the course of a given shift, to using technology, think of the Internet of Things, 24/7 real-time visibility to every wash inside that plant. And so by taking this historically opaque process and adding a sensing platform, some proprietary chemistry, and the power of the Internet, again, we were able to save them over the course of 1 year nearly 1 million gallons of water, reduce cleaning times by 1,300 hours, which gave them more time to produce milk, which is the business they're in. And perhaps most importantly, they saw quite dramatic improvement in and better consistency in 2 aspects of shelf life or product quality, which again makes this case that green is good for business. They saved water, but at the same time improved quality, drove throughput considerations, and didn't skip a beat on food safety, which, as you can see from the quote here, is their primary concern. So very powerful examples of the work happening today. So what are the challenges to change? What is preventing us from taking greater action? And we're all well-informed, well-intentioned business people. What stops us from taking bolder action with respect to making important moves and decisions and taking actions around water conservation? Well, the first and foremost is pure and simple economic incentives. So water is still hugely inexpensive in many parts of the world. And so there's really no economic incentive for change because water's market price is oftentimes completely disconnected from the underlying risk profile in terms of its scarcity. And so it's difficult, as we all know, for those of us, you in the room, whose job it is to contribute to business cases to try to cost justify or glean an ROI off of an investment in a technology or a program to save water, the challenges we face because water is cheap. Second of all, and I gave the example of our everyday life, it's not yet personal for many of us. So many global manufacturers can still run their operations, have ample access today to fresh water supplies, and so until it hits you personally, there's really no incentive for change. And lastly, I think together these forces are really stifling demand and therefore slowing innovation in important water-saving technologies and programs. So let's dive into these a little bit deeper. First, the fact that water is undervalued. So as I said, oftentimes the market price of water, because it's ultimately a local decision, is inversely related to the underlying risk in terms of how plentiful it is. So we need a new pricing mechanism. And you need only to look at Mumbai, for example, on this chart, a region facing considerable water scarcity, where water is priced at 28 cents a cubic meter. Okay? And if you contrast that to Amsterdam, a water that faces a much less significant water scarcity issue but places a higher value on water, you can see they've priced in Amsterdam water at nearly $3.50 per cubic meter. So we need a better means of pricing risk that ultimately better reflects the inherent scarcity we face globally from a water perspective. And that will in turn help businesses better understand and better adjust cost estimates and business models so they can take appropriate actions to understand, assess, and ultimately mitigate our risks. Beyond the fact that the pricing mechanism is broken, the other challenge is this is not an issue solely restricted to far-flung desert regions or outlying parts of the world. Some of the world's most highly populated, economically diverse and vibrant economies are those that face the greatest water challenges. And so there can be real impact on economy. And we have only to look at the state of California right here, in our own backyard for the Americans in the room. California is entering its 4th straight year of epic drought. The large majority of produce and nuts and seeds consumed in the United States are grown in California. California, in addition to being a major contributor to the U.S. economy, is, if you pulled it out, the 7th largest economy in the world. And experts estimate that thus far, the drought has cost that state over $2 billion and tens of thousands of jobs. So the impact of water scarcity, in the case of California, of drought on economies, we're seeing that it's quite real. Water scarcity, is also, it impacts our ability to grow and operate and sustain and accelerate the profitability of our business, as if we needed another challenge, in the aftermath of the great financial crisis. And so water impacts business in a couple of key ways. The first is, scarcity increases costs. Perhaps not as fast as it should, given scarcity and this broken pricing mechanism that I talked about, but nonetheless, whether it's in the direct cost of your product or in associated operating cost, the rising price of water can put pressure on margins and profitability. An additional impact of water is really tied to the fact that water scarcity can limit the availability of fresh water, which may force a decrease in production, which can ultimately put revenue at risk. And this is the emerging part of the conversation that we feel needs to be elevated. That water can really impact business value on two fronts: costs, which is oftentimes what we jump to, and that makes complete sense, but also revenue, in that to the degree production is threatened, top-line sales can be at risk. Okay, and so the most recent CDP water disclosure, I think, heightens this whole conversation around how water scarcity can impact business value, both from a cost and a revenue perspective. And I think really two things are quite compelling about this latest disclosure from 2014. The first is that 33 companies have disclosed that water scarcity does present, or likely will present, a material risk to their top line. So the sheer number of companies beginning to acknowledge that this is a potential risk. And the second is the magnitude. As you can see here, these 33 companies have acknowledged that 1 to upwards of 5 to 6% of their revenues potentially in jeopardy given the water scarcity risk. So much more transparency. You see benchmarking studies for Wall Street, much more transparency and conversation around, again, this top line production risk related risk to revenues that's out there. And this is a snapshot from a recent benchmarking report conducted by Ceres that, again, shows you that this idea of the impact of water scarcity on revenue and profits, it's real and it abounds. So you look at California, I mentioned the produce industry, a carrot manufacturer, carrot division profits down nearly 30% in light of the drought. We've worked with a lot of customers in Brazil in the aftermath of, during now the drought there, and its impact on the coffee industry. An epic drought in Australia in 2014 had a heavy impact on agribusiness, whether it be grain production, raw milk production on the global marketplace. So a lot of volatility regarding both the availability and the pricing of raw material inputs to many customers we serve. So this idea of the real impact to business of water scarcity, again, beginning to hit home. And so as a company with deep water expertise at Ecolab, and I think a pretty in-depth understanding of some of the challenges and issues faced by companies across industries around the world, we are committed to helping our customers, and in fact to helping all water users, really get the tools and the strategies and the information they need to assess and understand their water risks, so that they can factor it into business planning and ensure, the ongoing success of your business, as well as, frankly, ample supplies of fresh water for generations to come. And so we are pleased to announce a first-of-its-kind tool. It's an online tool. It's free, very easy to use. And so Ecolab has recently partnered with TrueCost, the global leader in valuing natural capital, to develop the Water Risk Monetizer tool, which is a financial modeling tool that enables business to assess water scarcity risk, whether that be at a specific site or in a region or across your whole enterprise, to understand the full value of water to your business, and again, so sort of to make up for this pricing mechanism gap that I talked about earlier, to quantify risks in terms that make sense to business. And this is, I think, where the tool is unique. There are a ton of very useful qualitative and quantitative tools out there, and we use them ourselves. They're hugely informative and impactful. But the difference, one of the main differences of the Water Risk Monetizer is it translates those impacts into financial terms, the language of business, so that we can incorporate it into scenario analysis and strategic planning, just as we would the financial aspects of human capital or other types of financial capital. And then it allows us, again, as I said, not only to look at the cost of water on a more fully valued basis, but its potential impact to our revenue and top line. So really what we seek to do with the Water Risk Monetizer is help take business from today's kind of business as usual approach when it comes to water scarcity, which is really hindered by, and I would say a function of the fact that the challenges are real. So we talked about the fact that water's full price doesn't reflect its full value, and this idea that it can be really difficult as business people for all of us to understand and really fully assess where and how significant our water-related challenges are. And so to take that and really move from business as usual to a more forward-looking and more proactive approach to incorporating water scarcity risks and informing better decision-making in business planning in the days and years ahead. And so the Water Risk Monetizer really works in two key ways. First, it looks at the water required to operate your business against your fair share of water, if you will. And so because water is finite and it is ultimately shared amongst various users at the local basin level, it looks, in terms of calculating your fair share of water, the Water Risk Monetizer really looks at your fair share as a function of your contribution to local basin GDP. So you can think of your fair share of water as that you've earned as a result of your contribution to the local basin economy. And to the extent you need more water to operate your business than your fair share, according to your contribution to the local economy, you may have potential revenue at risk. And so this is this new loss of revenue feature that we're particularly excited about. Additionally, the Water Risk Monetizer provides a directional indicator of the more fully valued cost of water for your business, which is its market price as well as a water risk premium to look at, again, the risk-adjusted price of water that may be more relevant for incorporating into your business planning and analysis. And so we think it enables more actionable quantification of water-related risks, puts them in financial terms, which, as we all know, is hugely important in business, and then ultimately can help inform and enable better management, understanding, and action to complement what companies are already doing. And so let's take a look at how this works. And here we've actually used the Water Risk Monetizer to simulate a hypothetical multinational beverage company. And so we've specifically used the beverage industry because they are an extremely forward-looking sector with respect to how to understand, manage, and mitigate water-related risks. So as you can see, in this particular hypothetical global beverage company, the price that they are paying for water, according to the 4 locations that you see here, is significantly different from a more risk-adjusted price of water. And so again, that which reflects the underlying scarcity risk at each of the local basins that these operations rely upon in order to operate. And to the degree that there's this large gap in all 4 locations between the market price of water and its risk-adjusted price, you can flag increased likelihood that there may be cost pressure and pressure on margins going into the future. Additionally, the potential revenue at risk, as well as the likelihood that that revenue risk might be realized, also differs significantly from one location to the other. So you can begin to see how you can look at not only your enterprise risk profile, but specific actions or how to prioritize given regions or actual manufacturing locations as you begin to incorporate this into your business planning. And so gathering the data and preparing analysis, the likes of which in a simple example I've just shared with you, is only the first step. And so, our vision is to enable people to use the water risk monetizer to incorporate this risk-adjusted price of water and this concept of lack of water, meaning a decrease in production, yielding potential revenue loss, into strategic planning, business analysis, financial business case preparation, and the like. Additionally, we think it helps make more solid business cases for proactive investments in water reduction strategies, technologies, or other programs, helps you to identify business units, regions, or even specific plants at greatest risk, helps monetize rates of return as you make investments designed to move the needle, and ultimately, from a strategic planning and even a footprint analysis operationally, helps to select where and how to increase production to meet growing demand over long-term time horizons. So when you pull it all together, it can be a little overwhelming. We're all very busy, lots of multiple competing demands for our time, energy, and attention during the day. But the good news is there are a number of things you can do, both big and small, to really better understand, assess, and ultimately complement your efforts to mitigate reliance on fresh water. And so here, we've shared some examples of what we're doing and seeing. At Ecolab, we're in thousands of food and beverage manufacturing plants around the world where we provide cleaning, sanitation, water, and waste treatment services to the food and beverage processing industry. And manufacturers really look to us to help them protect their valuable brands, to continue producing high quality and safe food, and to do so in a changing and ever-challenging environment. And so because we touch nearly 100% of the water used inside an operation, we have a broad purview of techniques and strategies that, again, can be used to move the needle. And so we do this using our total plant approach, which is a holistic view of water used across the plant, knowing that water used in one operation can be used elsewhere and impacts other operations, from your influent water to your effluent water or your waste, and everything in between. And so having worked with manufacturers around the globe, we've identified 6 what I would call simple but powerful strategies to reduce water use inside of your operation. And the first really has to do with establishing your baseline. And so having done over 200 deep dive, detailed water assessments at customer locations in more than 20 countries around the world, time and time again, the challenge that continually crops up, or the opportunity, I guess you could say, depending upon how you look at it, is that there is a missed opportunity to watch and monitor where water is used throughout a plant and the rate at which it's used throughout the operation. So this is where a metering and sub-metering plan inside your operation can really help you to establish a baseline to understand where you stand today, which is oftentimes one of the biggest challenges our customers face, and then, of course, to monitor your progress over time from a continuous improvement perspective. But metering and sub-metering is only part of the story. It must be accompanied by a robust monitoring program, or else it's just like having a bunch of data with really no plan to get after it. And so metering plus monitoring can be hugely impactful. And in our experience, if done well, can yield 10 to 15% reductions or net water savings across the entire operation. So that's piece one. The next really gets into behaviors, which, as we all know, when you're working across a global, oftentimes far-flung supply chain, it can be hard to understand behaviors, let alone, change them in the business we're all in. And so the first piece sounds pretty basic, but if a piece of equipment is not in use, there's huge opportunity in making sure that the water is not left running. I mean, again, it sounds basic, but having done this a couple hundred times, we found that very often there's very little understanding of how much opportunity this is, and it's overlooked because it seems so simple. And so if you haven't done so already inside of your operation, monitor your water usage when the plant is down for maintenance and there's no cleaning or sanitation occurring. You will be amazed, potentially, at the amount of background water consumption that's silently running when the plant is not even in use. And so we recommend that flow meters on all your key systems, be sure, again, that you're metering and sub-metering the use of water on key systems. So in addition to just basic behavioral changes, maintenance can be a big lever to pull. And so we've found, for example, steam leaks. The U.S. Department of Energy predicts that 15 to 30% of steam traps will fail over time if not properly maintained. And so for operations that use a lot of steam, This can mean tens of thousands of steam escapes because of lack of proper, pretty basic maintenance. And so a good preventive and corrective maintenance program, again, can be a huge determinant of water savings inside a typical food and beverage manufacturing plant. Depending on your market and depending upon the line of business you're in, there are typically considerable opportunities to repurpose the water that exists throughout a typical manufacturing location. And so this could be anything from taking repurposed effluent water and using it to clean trucks, or taking condensate from HVAC systems on your rooftop, or collecting homogenized cooling water and reusing it for cooling tower makeup. And importantly, these repurposing and reuse opportunities can be done safely. So be done without sacrificing or coming at the expense of food safety and without putting asset life or throughput at risk. So knowing how to make those trade-offs, lots of opportunity for water repurposing. Clean-in-place optimization. So I talked about this again. Clean-in-place is simply the process of cleaning manufacturing equipment like pipes and tanks and vessels without having to rip the entire plant apart in order to do so. And clean-in-place is often a huge consumer of water inside your manufacturing facilities, oftentimes upwards of 20 to 40% of water usage. And so, again, with some simple clean-in-place optimization strategies like your wash cycles, optimization of your rinse cycles, again, reusing rinse water in your utility water applications, for example, you can drive upwards of 40% reduction in clean-in-place water usage, which means 10 to 15% reduction in total water use across the plant. And what's more, you not only save water, but you save time, which again increases uptime and throughput, and oftentimes see significant reductions in energy usage. So a win-win on all fronts through optimization of the manner in which you clean and sanitize the manufacturing environment. And then lastly, utility system optimization. So utility systems, think of this as water used for heating, for cooling, for steam production inside the facility, or even water that may be consumed in the process of dealing with effluent or waste that's generated by the plant. And I'd say here highlight two strategies. The first is, again, just simple optimization. So optimizing those cooling towers and the boilers, these big pieces of equipment we all sort of walk by on a daily basis, can yield 30% net reduction in water savings. And these are also utility applications, boilers and cooling towers, are also prime candidates for water reuse, which can yield up to 100% savings on a per system basis when you get into some of those, tap into some of those opportunities. And so, our customers come to us wanting our 3D TRASAR platform of technologies for utility water applications. We combine that with the power of our in-unit service, and it's this kind of value, ultimately net reductions of 30% of water usage that can result. And so just these 6 simple water strategies can really uncover huge and hidden sources of water savings right inside your own facilities. And so on average, as I mentioned, having done about 200 of these around the world, the savings are quite significant, over 140,000 cubic meters of water saved on average, with less energy usage and less waste generated. And the dollars add up as well. Imagine saving nearly $750,000 on average at a given plant. And so significant savings opportunity as well as less use of natural resources. And so in closing, I would leave you with the question that we're all asking ourselves. As business leaders today, what is the value of water to our business? And even if you're not in the state of California or in Australia or in Brazil facing drought conditions over the last few years, I think there are some powerful questions to incorporate as you are into your business planning, such that as you seek to reduce your reliance on fresh water while continuing to grow and ensure the ongoing viability of your business, are worth giving some thought. So, what strategies are in place to ensure that you retain access to the fresh water supplies that you need to operate your business? And how realistic are your growth goals, your globalization goals, your goals in some of the more far-reaching markets that you want to tap into for growth in light of the inherent situation with water scarcity in some of those local economies and geographies? And how do you involve suppliers and partners in this conversation so that they can help you reach your goals and you can put their capabilities and technology to use for you as well? And so with that, I'd say thanks for coming out this morning to join me. It's been my pleasure, and I would love to take a few questions at this time. Would be great. Thank you. Is there a brave soul in the room? Oh, one brave soul. Thank you.
Many of the plants that bring in ingredients, the agricultural footprint is actually the largest source of water risk.
Yep.
Does the water risk monetizer contextualize this or bring this in an agricultural setting?
Yeah, it's a great point. So, yes, and thank you for raising the question. So, as I mentioned, 70% of fresh water consumption is actually used by agriculture. And so a significant amount, and in the food and beverage industry, obviously, that impacts all of us. And so we do. The water risk monetizer can not only be used to assess risk of your own manufacturing operations, but can be used to go and travel upstream into your agricultural supply chain as you seek to better understand and frame up risks there. And again, we see customers starting to move from the great work that has been done around their own operations into the agricultural supply chain. So in the series benchmarking study, for example, that I cited, I believe Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, and Unilever, for example, were cited as leading lights and leading thinkers around how to set sustainable policies on farm or in the field to get after that. So I think it's a huge opportunity, and yes, to your question, the water risk monetizer can help you extend your analysis into that agricultural supply chain. It's also something we're thinking about because we not only at Ecolab serve providers on the processing side, but we're on farm as well, particularly in the dairy industry, and we know that they use cleaning and sanitation there. Certain aspects of waste treatment and liquid solid separation. I mean, for those of you, manure management on a dairy farm has been cited as a massive issue that the industry is grappling with. So we're looking for opportunities, building upon what our customers are doing around how do we serve them well and follow them as they go on farm and into the field to start to tackle opportunities inside of their agricultural supply chain. So yes, great question. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Oh, looks like here.
You talked about the challenge with the undervaluing what water really costs. How does industry get government to, in a public-private partnership to understand how we have to change that dynamic so that we do encourage more innovation and more, water savings, et cetera?
Yeah. Oh, I think it's a great question. So for those of you, I don't know if everyone could hear, how do we get governments to pay attention to this need to, fix this broken pricing issue given the fact that the price of water in a given location is oftentimes inversely related or artificially low relative to its underlying risk. I think it starts with us, and I think some organizations, several represented at this global summit, have actually started to use this risk-adjusted water price in their own internal business analysis and operations. And so I think many people are already using a risk-adjusted water price to calculate a more accurate picture of the typical return given long-term time horizons over 1, 3, 5, 10-year time horizons. So I think it starts with really walking the walk, as many of us are already doing inside of our local operations. I think, too, as part of the government, the advocacy and the external relations and the government relations functions that each of us have, it's bringing this information, bringing these water plans to governments and saying, where are there programs available? Where are there subsidies available? Where could we make the case for what we're trying to do with respect to water management and water savings and have the government co-fund, in some instances, what we're trying to do? We've approached several water municipalities, for example, in the state of California, in the aftermath of the executive order that Governor Brown issued, mandating reductions in water usage by energy. So not only are we, at Ecolab committed to reducing our own water usage at our plants in California by 25%, We're going to customers and in many instances governmental agencies or the water agencies in the state to say, how can we get creative here and help customers do the right thing to make investments that can help move the needle long term? So I'd say it really starts with kind of walking the walk to the degree we can of using this risk-adjusted water price and even factoring potential loss of revenue into internal business cases. Second would be partnering with suppliers, along the lines of what I've mentioned today, and then going together to governments and advocacy agencies, either together or with working groups through trade associations like this one to get after it. So thank you. Great question. Well, good. Well, thank you for your time today. I would appreciate your attention on this important topic. I'd invite you to join us. We do have a booth at the iZone where you can come and get a demo of the Water Risk Monetizer. You can talk to one of our industry-specific water experts. So do come join us at a break in the iZone. We have a booth. Otherwise, I'd invite you to join us at ecolab.com or waterriskmonetizer.com. Thanks, and have a wonderful conference. Take care.